and welcome to the Texas TribCast for Tuesday, September 16th. I'm Eleanor Klibanoff, law and politics reporter, alongside, as always, editor-in-chief Matthew Watkins.
Welcome back.
Thank you. I was extraordinarily tempted to not return to work after a couple of weeks off. I will tell you this, though. I was in Europe, and
I've heard of it.
I am alarmed to tell you that the Europeans very aware of Texas redistricting.
Interesting.
I promise I did not bring this up. I promise. Say you're from Texas. Texas. First of all, the reactions it gets. I was traveling with a friend from New York, and it's like the two places people know in
Texas
Europe,
and New York.
Texas and New York.
Mm-hmm.
And got a lot of reactions. A lot of like, oh man, Texas. Like, oh, what's going on there? Nothing makes me more patriotic or more Texas bring my Texas allegiance out more than a European trying to tell me that they don't like how we're doing things here.
Yeah. I feel that. It used to be they would associate it with George Bush. They'd be like, "Oh yeah, you must be like a George Bush guy," and apparently now it's redistricting.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. And again, in Europe, I am a George Bush guy. Don't try and tell me how to feel about my elected officials.
Yeah.
No. So that was very alarming. I tried to escape it. I could not.
Well, that's terrible.
Especially the Germans. The Germans very alarmed about everything. I was like, y'all gotta calm down a little bit. It's not really, it's gonna be fine. Anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about this week. We have finally at least a little bit moved on from the redistricting brouhaha and have found ourselves in another, major national news story here in Texas. So this week we're going to be digging into sort of the college campus free speech wars that we've seen really bubbling up over the last couple of years that has culminated, perhaps that's optimistic, in an incident with Texas A&M where a professor was fired after a confrontation with a student over gender identity content in a children's literature course. This is just the latest in an ongoing series of clashes at Texas A&M, at Texas universities more generally, nationally on college campuses over diversity, equity, and inclusion, gender identity, what is taught, and who can say what. Similarly, the day after this incident, a Texas State professor was fired after he was accused of inciting violence while speaking at a socialism conference. So just a lot happening all at once. So joining us to talk through the nuances of these issues is Texas Tribune higher ed reporter Jessica Priest. Jessica, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Jessica is actually in Indiana this time.
Yeah.
Loyal listeners of the podcast will know that Sneha last week I accused of being in Indiana when she was actually in Illinois. So we sent Jessica to
Indiana just to make sure we had one. We are also joined by Zach Greenberg, faculty legal defense counsel at the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. Where are you, Zach?
We're in the great city of Philadelphia. Thanks for having me.
That's not Indiana or Illinois or Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
City of champions.
Yeah. Jessica, let's start with you, and maybe you can sort of just give us an overview of what happened and where things stand with Texas A&M.
Oh gosh, where to begin? Okay, so I think it was Monday. State Representative Brian Harrison started a Twitter thread where he shared a video that was taken in a literature course at Texas A&M. It's important to note that the video and the class in question that he shows happened over the summer. So it was a summer class, and it was about children's literature, and it was for college students, for juniors and seniors in college, not children. And the video it doesn't show anyone's face, but it's clear from watching the video. You hear a student talking to the professor and respectfully asking or confronting her about why she is teaching about gender in the course. The student says that it's, against her religious beliefs and argues that it's also against President Trump's executive order. We haven't spoken with the student, but I believe she's referring to an executive order the president issued in January that basically says, the federal government only recognizes two genders and instructs the federal agencies, directs them to not fund any projects that, in his view, would promote gender ideology. So this executive order is not a law. I think that's also important for people to know. So my reporting has been that there is no federal or state law that prohibits, a college professor from teaching about gender. Sorry, that was a very long explanation.
That being said, Brian Harrison, the state representative who posted this, who is an Aggie and also perhaps the most conservative member of a very conservative legislature,
and a social media raconteur a little bit, right? Like he is gets much of what he is known for is sort of identifying these things on college campuses, highlighting and demanding for significant penalties, including firing.
Right. And has been pretty effective, particularly at his alma mater, of drawing attention to these things and bringing changes to it, really pushing the idea that these universities, particularly A&M, in his mind, are promoting an ideology that doesn't align with the values of the state or what he thinks the university should be teaching, and therefore that what he would call indoctrination should be stopped and eliminated, essentially.
Right. And in this case, he did sort of, by escalating this, he called for, or Jessica, talk a little bit about what the HR side of this, what happened then in terms of penalties.
Yeah, so in the tweet thread, so in addition to the video of the student, where you hear the student and the professor talking, he also shared what appears to be a recording of either a phone call or an in-person meeting with the university president, President Mark Welsh. And in the video, President Welsh appears to defend the teacher or the professor and what she's teaching, and initially tell the student that it's not happening, firing her is not going to be happening. It's important to note that we don't have the full conversation, we don't know the full context, but it appears that he initially was hesitant to discipline in this case. But so that conversation, we believe, took place over the summer. And then this tweet was in September. And, within days of this kind of going viral, he appears to have changed his mind and demoted the dean and the department head. And ultimately, he terminated the professor in this case. And the cited reason was that the course content did not align with the course catalog description. He said it's about academic responsibility rather than academic freedom. Students should, I guess, when they're looking at the catalog, know what they're signing up for. So yeah.
Zach, let's bring you in on this. I mean, what do you sort of make of this whole incident and the students' argument, the faculty argument, and the administrators' argument?
Yeah, we defend academic freedom here at FIRE. The idea that professors have the right to discuss these controversial issues in class, areas within their expertise, and they need breathing room to discuss these issues. And it's really sad to see professors being fired for their in-class teaching and pedagogy. I know there was a dispute between the student and the professor about what exactly the law was, the student's disruption in class. But we do feel that universities should resolve these issues, taking into account the societal importance we have for academic freedom and the free change of ideas at a public university bound by the First Amendment.
Zach, I want to ask you a little bit to kind of dive into this question of First Amendment freedom of speech and academic freedom and how that kind of fits in there, right? Because we, of course, know the First Amendment protects people's right to say things, including things that are offensive, and not be punished by the government for it, except for, small examples, the whole yelling fire in the crowded movie theater and all that kind of stuff. But then there is the separate kind of conversation around academic freedom, right? And this idea of not wanting the government to interfere too much with the what's being taught and what's being researched. I mean, this is a state school. How does the concept of academic freedom fit into this isn't a professor who got fired for going out on the street and saying something offensive. This is something that
We're
was
gonna get to
said.
that.
Yeah, we're going to get to that. That this was something that was said in the classroom. So how, if at all, should we or the courts look at how that played out?
Yeah, the Supreme Court said that academic freedom is a special concern of the First Amendment, which doesn't tolerate laws that cast a pallid orthodoxy on the classroom. And the general idea is that academic institutions in America should be places where students and professors are the most free to discuss their ideas, more so than any other institution in our society, just because of the purpose of the university and the importance of these institutions to our society. And so when it comes to these disputes over what professors say in class, the professors teaching and their research and their debate and discussion of ideas, that's really the core of their job duties, their job responsibilities. And they're trying to engage their students to try to get them to discuss these ideas and really participate in these debates we're having in our society. And for a university to fire a professor for having this discussion, even if it may be offensive to students or controversial out there, it's really the opposite of the goals of the university and the values of free speech and academic freedom.
How does that break down, though? Because I think that there is a question here in this case about, was she teaching what she should have been teaching in the course, right? I am also a Texas A&M graduate.
We made it what, 8 minutes before you mentioned?
Thank you very much. Yes.
Yeah.
It's been a very long time since I've been in the classroom, and I know a lot of things have changed, but I do remember a very specific class at A&M. It was a philosophy class. I think maybe even an intro to philosophy class, and it was taught by a lecturer whose research interest was truth commissions, this whole South Africa or other places having these and their effectiveness and everything like that. And she decided that this course was going to be about that as opposed to like more broad philosophy, which it was an interesting course. It was also not the course I signed up for.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like completely unreasonable for a student to be upset about something like that, and B, for a school to be like, no, you need to like teach what's actually like on the syllabus and what we're asking you to teach here. That seems to be somewhat the case that Welsh, the president, is arguing, is that she didn't teach how this course was advertised. How do you sort of see that factor in this conversation?
Yeah, you're right. And that if you have a physics professor and all they do is talk about political issues the entire time, I think you can make an argument the professor is not teaching the course as it's supposed to be taught. And it's really depending on what is in the syllabus and what is the purpose of the course. And of course, faculty members need some breathing room to go off topic some of the time just to share their expertise and to make the class a little more engaging. And our argument is that the determination of what is taught and how it should be taught, that should be made at the university academic faculty level, right? That should be determination by the faculty member, the department chair, the people who are most well-versed and experts in this category. If it's made by administrators or politicians, you can see that they can be very easily abused to target professors who talk about controversial issues. So you're right, it's definitely an issue. It's definitely a limit of academic freedom of not teaching the class as advertised, not giving students proper notice of what's being taught. But if that is going to be a determination, the professor is unfit to teach, that should be at the academic level.
I mean, just to sort of widen this out beyond this incident, I mean, we have seen, if you just take Texas A&M, we've seen a lot of these clashes, but also, statewide and nationally. Why are college campuses such sort of hotbeds of these free speech issues? And has that always been the case, or are we in a moment of particular clashes, I guess?
I think it's really always been the case. You can think it's stories about the founding fathers, raising hell at their universities. The first free speech zones put in place to combat protests against the Vietnam War. So I think these universities have really always been areas where students and faculty members feel free to express themselves and discuss their ideas. And naturally, that involves some opposition from those on campus and off campus to what's happening at these universities because they are taxpayer funded, right? They're part of our communities, part of our society. And so you're always going to see the precarious situation of universities in our society, how they operate, which is why having academic freedom for both the institution and for the individual professor is so important, because in many ways they are kind of majoritarian principles, right? We have this freedom to discuss ideas that are controversial, that are offensive. If you're talking about things that everyone agrees with, 2 + 2 = 4, the sky is blue, you don't need academic freedom or free speech. You need it when you do draw the ire of politicians and the government officials who want to censor you.
Jessica, I wonder what you make of Welsh's specific argument here. I mean, we talked about it, like how it could present a different case. On the other hand, the firing happened months after the incident happened, as you mentioned, Jessica, and also, I think there are probably a lot of people within the A&M faculty and at other universities saying, like, okay, is this actually the reason, or is this a convenient excuse to get rid of someone who is bringing a lot of intense political pressure to the university from people like Brian Harrison, but even more so from folks like Governor Greg Abbott, who has tweeted about this, and other leaders. They don't want this kind of attention right now.
Yeah, so your question is what I make of his decision?
And his explanation for the decision, yeah.
Yeah, I think that university presidents, I mean, I would not want President Welsh's job right now. It's been a very difficult job. So it's like he has a lot of constituents, right? So I feel like he needs to make lawmakers happy to keep his job, but he also needs the trust of the faculty. And so I think that may be why he decided what he decided.
Yeah, he also has a very conservative board of regents to
Right. It really shows like who has the power here, right? Is like to event to just sort of say like, well, this and again, based like you said on the limited view we have of this meeting where he originally said like we're not going to fire this professor. Then we have a social media backlash led by state lawmakers and the governor and others, and then the professor is fired. It's like it shows like the levers of power that influence.
I mean, until I started reporting on higher ed, like I didn't really understand all those levers, and I think it's important for people to know that like these boards of regents are appointed by the governor, so they're in many cases like in lockstep with him.
And this comes after a legislative session where once again higher ed sort of saw some of that freedom curtailed in Texas. They passed the law goes into effect in January, so it's not in effect yet, but there will be a law in effect that gives regents, these governor appointed regents, more control over curriculum. This comes after they banned any programs related to diversity, equity, inclusion at colleges and universities. I mean, really seeing a tightening of of the control over what is taught.
Mhm.
It's been amazing to watch how much the governance and culture has changed at these universities in recent years. I mean, going back to 2019 when lawmakers passed their sort of free speech on campus bill, and that bill was passed, largely out of concern that conservative voices were sort of being shouted down and that they needed to be protected, and that, administrators and professors and other leaders at the universities were too liberal. We had 2020 happen after that, the George Floyd protests, the reactions there. And there's just been so much of a swing back, whether it's who's leading these universities. You've seen a lot of different university presidents leave, and politicians, very conservative politicians, being put in a lot of those major, president or chancellor positions. You have, you mentioned the DEI rules, some of these rules about what can and cannot be taught, and just a much swifter reaction to any kind of incident like this. It does very much seem, whether it's at Texas A&M whether it's at Texas State with the professor you mentioned earlier. There was an incident on the Texas Tech campus where a student was expelled very quickly and removed after saying admittedly some pretty terrible things about the death of Charlie Kirk on campus, right? But the swiftness at which these administrators are taking action really feels like, Jessica, it has created a sort of culture change on these campuses in just like the past like half decade. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would agree with that. Yeah, and just a small correction, Eleanor, like the law that you're mentioning, Senate Bill 37, part of it has gone into effect, and the part of the law that has gone into effect, basically either did away or significantly weakened like faculty, representative bodies in higher ed. So they're largely, I mean, they've always been advisory, but they were elected by their other faculty members and advise the administration on academic matters. And now their power is significantly weakened.
Zach, have you felt this sort of pendulum swing and sort of free speech at the center of all of this?
Yeah, it's almost like a political football, right? It's like whatever party is in power, whatever they believe the situation to be, they're gonna most likely abuse the free speech rights of those around them. It's almost like the parties don't really have any principles at all. They're just, it's all about the raw power. And so free speech ideally should be this societal wide neutral principle of general applicability that it protects everybody equally, no matter who you are or what you say. But we're seeing free speech kind of be warped into a rallying cry for those outside of power. And then once they get in there, it's just everyone's a nail in their hammer. And they see this happening, right now, the Attorney General of the United States of America, right, saying they're going to prosecute hate speech. Like it's happening right before our eyes. That could be a woke talking point 5 years ago. And now it's happening, at September 16th, 2025. So yeah, we're literally seeing it in our lifetimes, in our very short political life, what should I say, time spans over here, that like, yeah, this issue is being very warped. And I think it would be worthwhile for university presidents and especially politicians who support universities to have a backbone, to be principled, support free speech, even for those that they disagree with.
I mean, I think you mentioned already Charlie Kirk. I mean, I think a historian over the last that half decade, even longer, like a real main character in these debates. Kirk, obviously a right-wing political activist who was assassinated last week in Utah while on a college campus, sort of doing what he became best known for, which was hosting these debates and coming to college campuses, really trying to, I think in some ways, whether intentionally or not, like test the limits of these free speech protections for views that maybe are not as widely accepted on college campuses. Zach, can you just talk a little bit about, Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA and sort of the role they played in this arena of college free speech?
Yeah, I mean, Charlie Kirk founded Turning Point USA to provide a counterbalance to what he saw as a liberal bias on campus. It's a conservative student group. It's been around for a while now. They're an oft-censored group. We've defended them when they've gotten their funding revoked, when the groups got de-recognized, their speakers get disinvited, only because they do serve as this counterbalance. And yeah, and because of that activism, they've definitely gotten a reputation. They've been opposed by many liberal groups, of course. And I think the reaction to Charlie Kirk's assassination among the left is something we've seen against Turning Point USA for a while now. That he essentially got what was coming, and this was a good thing. And that's sad to see, because it was a political assassination. It was a violent response to free speech. And if you're going to defend free speech, you have to defend it for everybody, even the groups and individuals that you disagree with.
I found it so interesting. I was looking at FIRE's website, or your group's website, the Students Under Fire report that found that over the last 5 years, Turning Point USA was the most targeted campus group, tied with Students for Justice in Palestine, which is interesting. Of just like, again, free speech. It's not about like which side you like. It's like both. It has to extend to everyone. Sort of
Yeah, especially SJP the last couple of years, right, with the Gaza conflict. I feel like that group's been around for a while. They're very active on campus. They're very well organized. And as a result, they get censored a lot. So it's almost you put your neck out there and you're going to get bopped, unfortunately.
right? Yeah. Jessica, how have we seen Texas lawmakers respond to the assassination of Kirk? I mean, both, I think many of them were like personally friends with him and knew him and sort of supported him politically, but then also, on their response to the social media responses this has kicked off.
I haven't talked to any personally, but just following their social media, you can see that they're upset when people are making light of Charlie Kirk's death or disparaging him and his legacy in some way, or I don't know, celebrating his death, and calling for those people to be for those who are expressing those opinions to face consequences, whether it be firing or mostly just losing your job. Like we've seen, I don't know that we've seen it in Texas, but I think nationally there have been professors who've been terminated for opinions that they've expressed online. And then here in Texas, a colleague of mine worked on a story about, the Texas Education Administration Association administration, you know,
Other
uh,
way.
I guess finding 100 something teachers maybe did this and pursuing their teaching license.
Yeah, I mean, Mike Morath, the, commissioner, saying that they would not just fire teachers who were found to have made, comments they deemed inappropriate, but revoke their teaching license, as you said. Yeah.
Which is kind of like, I mean, I still need to read up on that reporting, but that's kind of like extraordinary if you think about like our shortage of teachers, like an extraordinary kind of act. But yeah.
On the other hand, Zach, I mean, I'm not, I wouldn't really want my kindergarten teacher celebrating the murder of someone on a college campus, right? I mean, walk me through how you think about this, right? I mean, I think there are there's a reasonable urge to be angry at the people who celebrated the murder of a human being for, exercising his free speech right. How do you view kind of that reaction? When you see things like what's happening in Texas?
Yeah, I mean, if you're a public university or a public employee in general, you have the right to comment on political issues in your private capacities. I mean, speaking on social media, talking about Charlie Kirk, that's a legal standard. The government can come back and say your speech is disruptive to the institution, that because your speech renders you unfit to teach or unfit to do your job, we can punish you for that. So it's really a balancing test between the individual's right to express their political views under the First Amendment and then the institution's interest in ensuring smooth operations. And that's a pretty high bar, right? You really have to clear, show a lot of disruption, really manifest in fitness to do your job to overcome some fundamental First Amendment rights. An example is a university professor who perhaps continually says, I'm a racist. I can't teach black students. And the students certainly feel uncomfortable going to the university and being part of the class because the professor has these racial views. But many of the situations, it is a teacher or a public employee just expressing themselves politically, just expressing themselves about Charlie Kirk, sharing their views about him. And unless the university or the institution shows that, this individual can no longer be a functioning teacher or nurse or can't do their job and teaching effectively, then I think the university institution shouldn't allow the person to keep their job. Because we want to preserve this right to comment on political views, even if it is offensive to others.
It's been a disappointing week. I mean, of course, like the assassination of Charlie Kirk is a terrible, terrible event. That in and of itself makes for a terrible week. You would hope in a healthy and functioning democracy and society that it wouldn't then immediately break down into this side does this side does this side is worse. And we would maybe view ourselves on the side of maybe people who think we should be able to talk about things and not be murdered for them, and people who don't support that.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And not try to cast blame on anyone other than who's pushing for, who's condoning or supporting that kind of violence. We do not seem to be at that place right now as a society or a state or anywhere else. And I would love to see us get to that place.
Right. I mean, and we have the same conversation on obviously the assassination of Charlie Kirk is such a, unprecedented thing, but it is like, it does remind me in some ways of the conversations we have after like a school shooting where it's like, can we not just like grieve this and talk about, like how does this become politicized so quickly on all sides? And it just feels like we are not at a high point of being able to discuss, horrible human tragedies and politics in the same conversation without sort of devolving into our worst selves.
Zach,
On that point, we're going to say we're at the cancel culture part of the tragedy cycle. You hear about this, where like the tragedy happens, people express outrage or grief, and then people criticize those people expressing outrage and grief, and they lose their jobs. One of the first cases we ever had in 2001 was a professor who said that 9/11 was a good thing, that they're glad the Twin Towers went down, and that this is a happy thing. And you can imagine the reaction that got in 2001, right? And so same thing happening right now, right? You have a tragedy. Charlie Kirk got assassinated. People comment on it. Now there's a huge watch list out there. I think 50,000 people that are being fired from their jobs or being contacted with their employers for what they say. So it is definitely a sad day for America, and I think this should definitely stop happening.
Do you have any thought? I hate to put you on the spot, but like, do you have any thoughts? Like, what needs to happen to get us out of this cycle?
I think it's kind of just building a free speech culture, like recognizing that we're all human beings. We all live in America. We all have free speech. Almost like a basic understanding of respect. Like you wouldn't want this done to you in 5 years. Don't do it to us. Like we shouldn't have canceled the people that were criticizing George Floyd. We shouldn't cancel people that are criticizing Charlie Kirk. The next person that gets assassinated, we shouldn't cancel those people either. So I think it has to stop somewhere. And instead it keeps kind of fueling and getting worse and worse. But the more people that recognize the value of free speech, I think they'll understand why this is harmful to our societal fabric and our nation, and they'll stop it.
I mean, I think in some ways the through line also is like, of this professor being fired or of, people sort of, it's like, or this like intense blowback, 180 teachers investigated for speaking, ill of Charlie Kirk is like the people who never will be actually penalized for this, right? They're not actually going to take 108 teachers to, or open themselves up to that many lawsuits or whatever, but it's just sort of the chilling effect on free speech. Again, whether it's something you support or something you don't, of like, I just won't share my opinion for fear that I could be penalized for it.
Yeah, I mean, it would also just be nice to get to a place where like we're not just talking to each other, but we're talking to each other in a way where we're like seeking to understand and be understood, as opposed to like scoring points and humiliating or caricaturing the other side. But we are not at that place right now. But I'm curious, like to your point about a chilling effect and everything like that, Jessica. I mean, what do you think about? What do you hear, if anything, from people on these college campuses? I mean, do you think that chilling effect is happening? How are people, professors and others, reacting to what has happened in the last few weeks?
Yeah, all of this.
Yeah, I mean, it's a mix. Like I've heard from professors saying that they are themselves like recording their own lectures to kind of have as like evidence if anything were to be shared on social media so they could have the full context. I've heard some are self-censoring, that they're just not going to talk about certain topics anymore because they don't want to get in trouble. And then there are others who feel like I'm going to keep teaching because that's in the best interest of my students, and that's who I'm here for. The American Association of University Professors put out a survey, I think, the week before the stuff with Texas A&M happened, that found like 25% of the respondents in Texas were looking for jobs outside of the state just because of the political climate here. So it's not looking good.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I imagine this is, like many things we talk about on here, going to be continuing to develop and unfold, and nothing will be resolved, despite your optimism about where we might all end up as a country.
I didn't say I was optimist.
Yeah,
I just
right.
wish.
Yes, right. Your fan fiction about the future of American democracy. Well, I just want to really thank Jessica and Zach, you both, for joining us and taking the time, and appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. You can get the TribCast anywhere you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. Our producers are Rob and Chris, and we will see you next week.